Plastic is a miracle. It really is a miracle substance, letting us replicate useful materials like glass, wood, and metal at a fraction of the cost. Its lightweight, just 5% of glasses, lets us ship food across the world and over time. And, most shockingly, it uses less energy and emits less carbon than making these packaging and construction alternatives. That's surprising because plastic is literally made of oil and natural gas, two incredibly important resources the fight over which everybody is expected to know a little bit about. But the average person's daily life is more defined by plastic than it is by crude oil, or maybe any other material. 10 billion tons of plastic have been produced in total. The industry is worth about $1.2 trillion a year, and as many as 1 million plastic water bottles and 10 million plastic bags are sold every single minute. This video is about the fight over that crucial material and, perhaps a symptom of its usefulness, over what to do with the billions and billions of tons of it when it's thrown away. Plastic on its surface is just a material that uses repeating chains of monomers called polymers. There are 7 types of plastic, each with different properties and uses, denominated by that number you see on the recycling symbol. Like 2 for high-density polyethylene on this water bottle, and 1 for PET on Logan Paul Prime. One very useful monomer is ethylene, which is used to make both types of polyethylene. Its production is a window into plastic geopolitics because it's such a key input in the production of many plastics. No ethylene, no plastic. It requires huge amounts of ethane gas, which are then transported into large steam crackers, heated up to 850 degrees Celsius until it cools and then condenses down into small pellets. Traditionally, this has been made with refined crude oil, but in 20 or 30 years from now, who knows if we're going to be producing as much oil as we do now. Many people are predicting we don't. The question that's come to define the industry is how to continue plastic production in a world of decreasing oil production. One study even estimates that with oil's diminishing role in transportation and electricity production, plastic may drive 40% of new oil demand in the year 2050. This fear is why Saudi Arabia has invested $20 billion into a chemical plant on its east coast and another $20 billion on its west, just so they have both sides covered. Qatar Petrochemical is also making massive investments in American ethane crackers. These will join already huge chemical facilities, like those in Ulsan, South Korea, a $7 billion investment from the Saudis, and Ludwigshafen in Germany, the largest single chemical complex on Earth. So nowadays, away from refined oil products, many modern crackers have instead shifted to cheap natural gas. This, more than anything, has changed the plastic industry as a new country. The United States has shaken up the market with its own fracking revolution. As Americans pioneered and perfected hydraulic fracturing, essentially spraying hydrocarbon-rich rocks to release trapped oil and gas in them, the country became the world's largest producer of fossil fuels, surpassing Russia and even Saudi Arabia in oil production in 2017. This seemingly endless sea of cheap gas has given America a unique opportunity to dictate plastic's future, and they're all in. Looking at a map of gas infrastructure, it's not hard to spot where the center of the industry is. Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast. Here, production of ethane has tripled in the past decade to around 3 million barrels a day, and exports have gone from practically none to 500,000 barrels per day. America's largest shale field, the Permian Basin, sits close to the coast and the Mexican border. So as the US becomes the new hub for this chemical, companies have been investing into American-made plastic, practically all of it being along the Gulf Coast where it can be easily exported. Though the EIA estimates that by 2040, the northeastern US will produce as much ethane as the Gulf. Sitting on large shale deposits like the Marcellus and Utica formations, the region is already a large producer of gas, but it's mainly used to heat homes and buildings during the area's cold winters, using the methane from the gas. The ethane is stripped out since leaving it in generally raises its heat value above regulatory limits. With all this ethane left behind, some see no future with it other than plastic. A Shell plant has been under construction in western Pennsylvania since 2019, planning to produce over 1 million tons of plastic pellets a year, transforming the industry in the region. Unlike the Gulf factories, Shell chose this area specifically to make plastic for domestic consumption. And across the nation, over 300 chemical plants like this one are being planned or constructed. It's capture this new market or die. Across the ocean, the world's largest producer and consumer of plastic sources nearly all of its ethane gas from the United States, as well as around half its propane. This product is so important to China that in 2025, their ethane tariff was lowered from 2% to 1%. In 2025, even exempting it from that year's trade war. China has built modern refineries in 2 waves. The first started in 2015 when Beijing had allowed private refineries to import crude oil as long as you had a license. For the next 9 years, dozens of these teapot refineries popped up, particularly in Shandong province, called that because these were small, independent producers, and I guess they looked like teapots. Today, they source mainly from Western sanctioned oil producers, basically just Iran, Russia, and Venezuela, resulting in some sanctions to themselves from this business. Even plastic is a victim of the fragmenting global economy. The next push started in 2024, and this was a reassertion of state control over refining capacity. Around 2/3 of the investment will be done by state-owned enterprises and only 15% by private Chinese companies. Just like Saudi Arabia is concerned about potential diminishing oil supplies, so is China. China imports about 80% of its oil from overseas and could potentially be threatened with being cut off of America's ethane supply. In this second wave, no small crackers are being planned. In fact, some of these teapots are being closed and replaced, expanding their capacity by as much as 8 times. The goal here is to improve chemical yields through scale, and to China, scale involves more state investment. If chemical demand and demand for plastic ends up outpacing oil demand, this will put China in a good position to continue its dominance of the plastic industry, and because of how important plastic is as an input to other things, the manufacturing industry in general. Hey, if China wants to make flying cars, guess what material they'll still need to make it take off? Before we go on, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, ProtonMail. In the digital age, your privacy is at stake with warrantless surveillance being done by large intelligence agencies. Did you know that your data is likely collected and compiled into a massive searchable database which may include your social media usage, geofencing, or facial recognition technologies? Under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the American government may monitor foreign nationals outside the US without a warrant. Big tech companies using your data to perfect advertisements to you are vulnerable to Section 702 requests. Any piece of information a big tech company may have on you, the US government can have as well. The same is true of your communication, emails, texts, and phone calls. However, ProtonMail provides you with strong protections under Swiss law. Using end-to-end and zero-access encryption methods, ProtonMail hides the contents of your emails, files, and photo attachments from everyone, including Proton itself. Using the migration tool lets you switch your contacts over from Google or other providers with a few clicks, so switching to ProtonMail is incredibly easy. To start protecting your digital freedom today, make sure to check out the link in the description or pinned comment and visit proton.me/hoser. You can sign up today for free, so make sure to check it out. Now, back to the fight. This time, it's over trash. It's almost a little odd to hear that in the 2020s, both China and the US are trying to considerably expand their output of plastic. It's hard to look at plastic as many did in the space age when it was a shiny new technology and think, wow, that just exudes prosperity. Today, plastic has a terrible reputation. The very same qualities that make it so useful have also made it so harmful. Plastic is durable, light, incredibly cheap, and does not decompose. Unfortunately, that also means when it's thrown away, it's durable, everywhere, and yes, does not decompose. And just like plastic production has its political games, so too does plastic disposal. The question is what to do with plastic in a world of increasing production. Of the plastic created since its inception, about 1 billion tons are still in use, meaning 9 billion are now waste. About 350 million tons are thrown away every year. Of that, about 9% is recycled, 19% is incinerated, around 50% are in landfills, leaving a massive 22% being thrown away, somewhere in the world. All over the place, really. Of course, the mismanagement rate varies by area. In the US and EU, it's less than 5%, but in China, it's 27%. In India, it's 46%, and in sub-Saharan Africa, it is 64%. Though it's also estimated that 95% of the plastic used for packaging is thrown away after just one use, and that number is rather constant around the world. Half the plastic we produce is used for packaging, since without it, much of the food trade would be a considerable deal more expensive. Not only does all of this waste look bad, but there are serious and increasingly concerning studies that plastic, it's not good for you. Since plastic doesn't chemically break down, when it's out in the wild for a while, it's physically broken down by the elements, resulting in tiny microplastic fragments. These have been found in table salt, the ice of Antarctica, crops, and even in our brains. More recently, we think the presence of microplastics in the human body boosts the risk of heart attacks and strokes as well as inflammation, which itself causes many chronic diseases. Many of these fragments come from marine plastic, where the waste is broken down by waves into small beads called nurdles. Two famous large clumps of seaborne plastic are found in the western and eastern Pacific, the Great Garbage Patches, the eastern one twice the size of Texas. The vast majority of the junk here is from waste thrown into rivers. Various in Asia are the worst culprits, but none more than the Pasig River running through Manila. In fact, the Philippines is the worst marine polluter on Earth, both in terms of average per person, around 3.3 kilograms of plastic a year, and in total, about 36% of global waste. The sachet economy runs the Philippines, where food and everyday items will be sold in individual sachet packets for dependable, cheap prices. Like these individual packets of shampoo, rather than buying one bottle that'll last you a month. Over 160 million sachets are sold every day in the Philippines, contributing to the majority of the country's plastic waste. They may be cheap, but there's still a cost. In a study done to test for the presence of microplastics in mussels in the southern Philippines, 100% of samples came back positive. Not one mussel they tested was microplastic free. Realistically, the best way to get rid of plastic waste is the use of landfills. As long as they're properly managed, it's much healthier to have waste concentrated in one area than across the landscape, where it can more easily leach into food and water supplies. Recycling helps, but there's only so much it can do. You generally can't alter the type of plastic, and if you can, it's to a much lower quality. And that doesn't even mention the Great Recycling Crisis of 2018. This is when the Chinese government banned the import of 24 different types of waste, including paper, textiles, and plastic. Prior to this, China had processed about half of the world's recycled waste, where they would be re-added to the manufacturing cycle in the Chinese factory complex, importing around 7 to 8 million tons of plastic waste every year. They still import some, but the material must have a contamination level below 0.5% its weight. The environmental and health effects of this contamination were too much for the country to bear. This turned into a little bit of a disaster for everyone except the Chinese. America had been exporting around a third of its recycle-bound plastic waste. When this ban was imposed, it overwhelmed local recycling facilities, leading to mismanaged landfills and increased plastic incineration. The year after the Chinese ban, Philadelphia had burnt half of their plastic meant for recycling. Overwhelmed systems also meant that recycled plastic shot up in price, quadrupling after the ban. The higher the recycled price, the more attractive making new plastic is, which of course makes more waste in the long run. Much of this new waste was sent to countries which didn't have the infrastructure to deal with this influx. Southeast Asia got much of China's old orders. Turkey now receives 40% of EU plastic waste, and waste sent to Africa quadrupled. Without the ability to recycle it, the plastic flooded their ports and streets, sometimes literally as plastic clogged up their drain pipes. Sometimes it was just burnt in large piles. So to deal with the health and environmental threats, just 1 year after the Chinese ban, an international conference was held to make new rules on the export of plastic waste. In it, the member states agreed to require the consent of the destination country before mixed, hazardous, and non-recyclable plastic waste can be exported there. Every country signed it except for Haiti, Fiji, and the United States. In an infamous Basel case, at least infamous where I'm from, Canada had sent over 100 shipping containers of garbage mislabeled as recyclable plastic to the Philippines. They had arrived in 2013 and 2014, 5 years before the convention took place. And even though the Philippines had tried to send them back a couple of times, this was rejected by Canada for years. Then, after they both ratified the convention, the Philippines argued it applied to these containers as well. Tensions boiled up in 2019, causing the Duterte government to send 69 of them back to Canada, and a diplomatic spat broke out between the two countries. Over what? Garbage. The US had a similar spat with Kenya. The Kenyan government has imposed strict plastic laws to battle waste in the country, including a banning of all single-use plastics in protected areas and possible prison time for having a plastic bag. In the summer of 2020, when the US and Kenya were negotiating a free trade agreement, the American Chemistry Council, which represents many oil and chemical companies, had lobbied for Kenya to remove these laws, arguing the country is well situated to be a distribution hub for East African plastics. Environmental groups and lawmakers argued this would undo the work the country has done to remove their plastic waste problem, and in the end, no trade deal had been signed between the two countries. These are not the only international negotiations that broke down because of plastic. The Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution was another multi-state convention, this time in an attempt to reduce plastic pollution from production to disposal. They started in 2022 with the goal of ratifying the treaty by 2025. The negotiations became split between petrostates and plastic producers who didn't want to see a production cap put on any country like Saudi Arabia and India, which argued for better recycling practices, and those who were willing to impose a plastic cap or wanted compensation for pollution, the High Ambition Coalition of many European and poorer states. The gang couldn't come to an agreement by the last session in late 2024, and the treaty was not finalized, highlighting the very real effects plastic has on those who make it and those who it's dumped on. I guess that's just plastic politics for you.